Are you ever just sat there minding your own business and all of a sudden get the urge to...
I must organise my Steam library.
I did that a while ago. Launching Super Mario 64 is as easy as launching CSGO. Donkey Kong Jr. as natural as Call of Duty, as if to say it's now extremely painful and I don't really want to do it ever.
But now I'm left with a little bit of a dilemma, because over here I have my physical games, which I still love, but now there's a little bit of an overlap between that library and this one.
So now it's decision time. Which is better for me? Spending bucket loads of my own money on a physical game I might play once or twice, or ethically sourcing and extracting my game files through legal methods to run on an emulator for educational purposes?
Let's start by going through my setup. I mean, it feels like it's kind of important when talking about this. I run everything on this PC right here. I'll save you all the technical jargon about my specs, but it runs everything in 1080p pretty much flawlessly, and I'd rather discuss the software today, so there's no need to go into that. My controller of choice is this Xbox wireless controller. It's pretty perfect for a de facto PC controller, but you can use any controller you want. I will get to that. So now that I have everything set up, RetroArch installed, ethically sourced games ready to go, what am I going to play first?
Who wants to replay New Super Mario Bros? The main game I've been playing through RetroArch so far is Super Mario 64 because, oh my god, how haven't I played it yet? I've dipped my toe in a few times, I've got around halfway through playing on Super Mario 3D All-Stars, but I never really got it, if that makes sense. It didn't click in my mind, nothing really connected. I'd always prefer the later Mario games, as I imagine a lot of people do, but I never really got Super Mario 64. Until now. But regardless, this isn't a Super Mario 64 review. Let's talk about my experience with the game that doesn't involve playing it. After, of course, ethically sourcing my game and adding it to my RetroArch games folder, I downloaded the Mupen 64 core, which allows you to emulate a specific console. RetroArch have a vast selection of cores for download, and those are the files that emulate the game's original console and replicate it on your computer. The controls are already pre-configured, depending on which controller you connected to the software, and depending on which core you've loaded, but these are fully customizable, and believe me, I went in.
The only real finicky one was ironically the N64, and even then it was just basically setting B to A and A to B, and once you get that set up, it's good to go forever, so non-issue.
The main fear you get with emulating a game, at least from my perspective, is losing the original and authentic experience when playing on an original console. And yes, using something like an Xbox controller to play a game designed for alien hands is ironic, to say the least. But aside from the control layout, this didn't feel too far off the N64 at all. If anything, with the lack of anti-aliasing and any other enhancement emulators can bring, this really did just feel like playing an N64 game on a much cleaner feed. The only performance issue I've had on specifically Super Mario 64 comes from the level bored Bowser's sub, and that's literally a part of the original N64 release. If anything, this just makes it even more accurate. And even those quirky N64 exclusive graphical features like the Jumbotron on Luigi's Circuit in Mario Kart 64, that actually still shows live footage from your perspective going around the track. I don't know how either was achieved, but they're both important pieces in recreating the authentic gameplay experience on the N64. I'm so glad they're both here untouched.
Oh, and of course, if you do want to ever enhance the ever-loving out of your game, that's always an option. I basically only play my GameCube and Wii games in 1080p with improved anti-aliasing and texture filtering. It's basically like getting a remastered version of the game for free. Doesn't change the fact I spent £50 on Super Mario 3D All-Stars, but just ignore that. Hopefully you get my point.
Emulation opens the doors to playing these games with every wart and zip they carried onwards from the Wii era, or bringing it up to modern standards through various rendering upgrades and mods, new textures, codes that render the game at a higher frame rate. You can upgrade practically everything if the emulator supports it. You really think I'd ever replay New Super Mario Bros. Wii again if I couldn't upscale it? Really? But having said all of that, you do run into a few roadblocks, especially when playing with Nintendo's unique controller gimmicks. How the hell do they expect me to shake an Xbox controller?
Some consoles just have features so unique they're almost impossible to emulate. Shaking the Wii remote, pointing the pointer, the DS's touchscreen, all of these things I'm literally emulating right now. Welcome to the future.
You can just map things like motion controls to button presses, pointer controls, and even tilting to actual inputs like the right analog stick, or alternatively, Just use your Wii remote! You can choose to pair a real Wii remote or buy a third-party adapter to plug into a real GameCube controller if you wish to play these games, and it works super well. And going beyond just for Wii for a minute, with DS's second screen it's obviously a pain to navigate when you go from a dual screen touchscreen setup to a PC version's dual screen setup. But with a few toggles and settings, I can use my right analog stick for selecting things on a minimized touchscreen, and swap the top and bottom screens with a press of a button.
Okay. This is the coolest part for me. Whenever I want to swap the focus between my bottom screen and my top screen, I can literally just click in the stick, like that. And now you're watching the bottom screen. It's incredible.
For well-documented consoles like the Wii, I think this is the closest I'll ever get to playing a Wii without using a Wii. Ignore the fact my Wii is about 3 meters away from me, by the way, but it's quite obvious by now. Emulating these consoles, anything from 7th generation and below, runs basically flawlessly, and I find even the Wii U runs pretty smoothly too. I tend not to emulate it as much because setting up a gamepad through emulation is far more complicated than a shake the controller button. It's personal preference, but if I have all of these games neatly organised on my shelf ready to play...
Why switch at all?
This is Steam Big Picture Mode, otherwise known as my personal PC to console button. It's a full screen version of Steam designed for controllers and based on the current Steam OS that the handheld Steam Deck runs, and it's probably the best method I've used to launch emulated games. Now, I've dabbled with other programs like GOG Galaxy to log and display my games, but this, combining my Steam library with this massive emulation library, the layout, categories, UI, everything just feels great here to me. But there's like 80 games here. How the hell did I do it? Set up a RetroArch emulator and slowly succumb to importing your existing ROM library into its own game folder. Download Steam ROM Manager and spend 2 hours troubleshooting launch options only to realise the solution was right there on the left in the program the entire time.
Son of a bitch.
Set your file path, Steam account, pass the passwords, tweak the artwork, hit add to Steam, let it run, relaunch Steam, and you have now officially purchased The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess on Steam.com.
And now, I literally have every game I'd ever want to play in the near future at my fingertips. Every game launches in full screen, flawlessly, and I can access the Steam overlay just by pressing in the Xbox button on my controller. I have parsers set up for all my RetroArch cores, my Dolphin folders, my PPSSPP folder. I can literally just rescan and add all the ethically sourced games I add on from this point. Oh my god. This is just better.
Until you have to troubleshoot. I haven't ignored this intentionally, it's sort of just only come up now, but this is all sort of representative of an ideal world, unfortunately. Things just go wrong sometimes, far more than things go wrong on consoles. And if you're not willing to get down in the thick of it, tweaking files, troubleshooting, looking up errors online, then you might have an issue of getting something like this to work at all. And that all assumes you've even got a device capable of powering an emulator. There's a reason I haven't even touched Nintendo Switch emulation. It's not just about having a PC on par with a Switch's power, it's about having a PC powerful enough to emulate that console's entire environment to run the game files. And depending on your game, that PC might have to be incredibly beefy.
Oh, we haven't even touched on game compatibility yet. Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. Obviously consoles and more documentation, more research, and better emulators in general are going to have longer compatibility lists. But some games just provide huge stumbling blocks that they're just not going to get around anytime soon.
As the passage of time slowly consumes us all, most major releases I imagine most will be trying to play run with little to no issues on most mainstream emulators. An incredibly broad way of saying, yes, Wind Waker works. You can go back to being 8 years old again with little to no issues. But when things don't work out, it can be a pain! Even worse when there's literally nothing you can do. And even when you can do something, it's a pain! Like I said, I slaved away for 2 hours to get the ROM manager working. It was a pretty miserable experience the first time around. Messing with the RetroArch controls was a headache, and they just broke on me one day and I had to delve into controller files and Notepad++ to get the Xbox controller recognized again. Ugh. I had to go and format a weird shortcut that was causing me issues. It was disgusting. But I really do view it as worth it for how I want to play games, because this is just convenience personified. Like, I'm able to launch every single 3D Mario in history within the space of about 2 or so minutes, and if I was really bothered, it would be ridiculously easy to throw Odyssey into that collection too. So For me personally, of course, it's becoming increasingly hard to argue against this. Mainly because I'm so excited to talk about how I did all of this, and I'm really proud of the work I put into getting this set up. Hell, that's basically the entire reason I'm talking today. But as I get a little bit older, more mature...
Sure, I'm 17 years old, by the way.
Convenience is becoming more and more of a pull for me, and when I want to talk about a game, but have to choose between hauling my PC down the stairs to record the gameplay, or just emulate it with very little differences, I have to slide for emulation here. It just makes more sense for me.
But like, that doesn't mean I don't love my physical games collection. It's just that emulation is becoming a far more attractive and convenient option for me, and you can't really deny yourself of what gets you playing games. But I'll tell you what, emulation is never replicating this. Just chilling out on your bed, playing some Mario Kart. You can do all this with a Steam Deck, god damn it! Okay, it doesn't matter, it's a personal preference thing. Some people prefer the convenience of not having to set up an emulator and troubleshoot it, etc, etc. And some people prefer the convenience of having everything in one place. And to be perfectly honest, I think for the future, I'm gonna have to start using emulators way more. If I set them up right, I don't think anyone's gonna notice the difference anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But it's just more convenient for me. Now what to play first? I'm currently emulating the ability to look at my shelf and decide what I want to play. We're going to be here for an hour, so I know it's running perfectly.